The Toronto Blue Jays' needs have been apparent in their most recent stretch of games. They need pitching, they need hitting, they need pretty much just about everything else that a baseball team would need to get through a 162 game season. But these are some realistic names that they could potentially fill that number 5 starter spot with. So we'll break that down and much more on this episode of Jays Digest. What's up, Jays fans? I'm your host, Peter Vryonis, alongside host Nick Gosse, and rough game yesterday for the Toronto Blue Jays. They're going to get back at it tonight against the Baltimore Orioles. Hopefully they can have a change of faith, but man, they needed Chris Bassett to be good yesterday, and he was anything but that. So hopefully Jose Barrios can right the ship today, because these are a huge next 2 games against the Baltimore Orioles, and I might be a little early to call them must-wins, but I'm declaring it, Nick. These are must-win games coming up for the Blue Jays, and Barrios and Kikuchi got to get it done because this offense is struggling right now.
Yeah, you're allowed to have 1 or 2 must-win mid-season games, and this is definitely as close, especially with, Houston and the Yankees kind of winning yesterday. Obviously, it's too early necessarily to standings watch, but you don't want to fall too far behind. But before we get into the video, make sure to hit the subscribe button. We're on the road to 7,500, and your support has been unbelievable. And Peter, an article was posted by Sportsnet a couple of days ago, and it addresses the biggest need that the Blue Jays have right now, and it is a 5th starter spot. We saw yesterday Chris Bassett got absolutely shelled, gave up 8 runs, and the bullpen, we were texting about it during the game. We didn't know what we were going to do, and ultimately it was a mix of, Bowden Francis, Thomas Hatch, and some other guys there. But this can't keep happening, because if you're running a bullpen even every 5 days, if a starter has any sort of game like Chris Bassett does yesterday, you really hurt yourself for the rest of the series. And we really just have to hope that Jose Barrios and Yusei Kikuchi pitch good for the rest of this series. But this was the headline of the article, basically highlighting what I just said. With Alek Manoah and the Florida ironing things out, and Hyunjin Ryu still a ways away, it's safe to say the Jays need starting pitching, and they go over some realistic options. Now, we will warn you, these aren't crazy trade proposals. We'll have tons of those in the future as the deadline approaches, some more maybe crazy ones, but these are going to be some realistic ones. We can float out some potential names on the Blue Jays side that we can get out there, but let's just get into the first one, Peter. And it's Ben Lively of the Cincinnati Reds, and I'll just pop up the stats here. A couple of them will explain how he fits. You can look at the stats. He's 31 years old. And this one's a pretty interesting one. He has a 4.21 ERA, which, again, doesn't jump off the paper necessarily, but we would take that out of our 5th starter spot. And he's going to probably cost the most out of all these guys, because he's pre-arb, has some more, service, or less service time, some more years on his contract. But Peter, what would you think about Ben Lively to help eat some innings? And that's kind of the story of these players we're going to be discussing today, is eating innings.
Yeah, I think Ben Lively's numbers are a little bit inflated as well, because he does play in Cincinnati, which is the 2nd most hitter-friendly ballpark in all of Major League Baseball. So that 4.2 ERA should probably, creep down a little bit to maybe a 3.9 or just a 4 flat. And he's very prone to the home run ball, again, because he plays in a very hitter-friendly ballpark, but the K numbers are pretty good, about 1 an inning. He doesn't walk too many guys, and he is someone that's going to eat a lot of innings for this Blue Jay team. However, I did not envision the Reds to be this good this season, and they have so many young guys coming up, whether it be Elly De La Cruz, Matt McLain, Christian Encarnacion Strand. They have so many young guns ready to make an impact on the offensive end that they need all the pitching that they can get, because they have a legitimate chance to win the NL Central. So I don't know if they'll be that quick to part ways with Ben Lively, but he is the best on this list that we are going to show.
Definitely the best, and who knows, he'll definitely cost a lot more, probably one of our who knows, top 10 prospect for sure, you'd think. But going into depth a little bit more, like you said, his stuff won't blow anyone away, but he has an option remaining, which is kind of key here, and has performed relatively well this season and throws strikes. The Blue Jays should have him hold down a spot as long as he's needed, and then possibly go to AAA as injury insurance. And I don't know, the team control attached to him is what makes him more expensive, and realistically, if you're the Jays, you probably would have preferred that he didn't have that extra year, because it would have lowered the cost a lot. And this is, hopefully for the Jays, you need someone kind of like a little bit of a rental. But like you said, maybe throw a top 10 prospect out there. I don't know if you have any quick names you'd maybe trade for him. You think of guys like Sam Roberts, players like that we've thrown a lot out there a lot. But I don't know, any quick thoughts before we move on to the next one?
I mean, the bottom line, Nick, is that it doesn't matter who they get. They got to play better. And you can add a 5th starter to this current core. It's not going to make them into a championship contender. And that's just the way it is. They got to play better. They got to perform up to standard, and they haven't been doing that thus far. So getting a 5th starter, getting an ace even, is just a moot point at this stage in the season, because you haven't been hitting, you haven't been running the bases well. Your defense has been good, but that's when the ball isn't getting hit out of the ballpark by the opposing team. So It's been a rough stretch for the Blue Jays. I know they won 8 out of 10 before that Baltimore series, but something's got to change, and the players just got to play downright better before we can talk about any moves that are going to make this team closer to a playoff push.
Yeah, and I feel like these are more damage control moves for the bullpen going forward. And it's one that you spoke about in the past that we kind of need to make sooner than later, even though this isn't going to push us over the edge at all. It's just one that we need to have someone up there for our fifth starter spot. But let's move on to the next guy now, the New York Mets, who have been really the biggest disappointment, I'd say, of the year so far out of all the teams in the major leagues, is Joey Lucelli, and you can look at his stats here. Again, doesn't blow the numbers off the tape, doesn't strike out very many players, 4.43 ERA, a guy who's healthy, he pitches a lot, and would eat a little bit of innings. And we'll go over these a bit quicker because the biggest one was the last guy we just discussed. But any thoughts on Joey Lucelli as a potential replacement? And this guy would not cost very much at all. And I think if the Blue Jays are going for someone just as a temporary Band-Aid, this could be worth it. But then you kind of wonder who we have in the minors.
Yeah. We're gonna gloss over this guy pretty quickly because Mets fans don't like him, and he's not good. If this guy is starting games for your team, you're in trouble. And he's a depth piece at best. He's a stopgap, which is probably more of a likely get than Ben Lively if you're looking for a stopgap. But yeah, I'm good. I'm good on the Joey Lucchesi front. I'm all good, man. We can move on to the next guy.
Yeah, and quickly, a quick note is this kind of just goes to show how poor management is done with depth in AAA. Just a quick shout out there because we wouldn't even be looking at players like this.
If that's any silver lining to you guys.
Not much of one. But let's move on to someone who's actually pretty good. I know a lot of Blue Jays fans will see this name and say they might turn off, they might pause the video, they might go walk away. But Chase Anderson has found something this year at 35 years of age and plays for the Rockies. So most likely to get traded there. 2.25 ERA in 32 innings. Has pitched, I believe, 5 innings in back-to-back starts. He's a pretty solid player. He will cost a little bit, but I would not mind this guy. I think he seems like a perfect Band-Aid to me. I don't know how you feel, Peter, but seems like a pretty perfect Band-Aid depending on the cost, which you wouldn't think would be too much for Chase Anderson.
Yeah, sure. I mean, the underlying metrics aren't great on him. He's got a very high expected ERA and doesn't strike anyone out, only like 5 per 9 innings. So, again, this would act as a stopgap. And the bottom line, I'm going to sound like a broken record here. You got to play better. You can put me in the 5th starter spot for all I care. The way the team is playing, it wouldn't make a difference. You got to start hitting and you got to start executing your pitches a lot better if you're the Toronto Blue Jays. Talk is great about new moves, and it adds traffic to the channel, and it allows us to kind of envision scenarios of how this team is going to play out for the rest of the season, but it's just not good enough. And I haven't gone on a rant in a while here, but the Blue Jays need to start playing better, and it's very frustrating to watch. Very, very frustrating.
Yeah, and I guess the highlight of this move is you like to hope that the core is going to start performing better, and when they do, you will need that 5th starter spot taken care of. But like you said, it needs to happen first, in theory, for the Jays to win. They need to start playing better, and that's the bottom line. But I wouldn't be surprised if Ross Atkins, he needs to make a move soon, whether it's now, whether it's... I don't think you can wait till the trade deadline for this 5th starter spot, assuming things stay the way. You
might be out of it by then.
Exactly, if you keep throwing this out there. But one quick final note on this guy, I don't think he's going to... be a Blue Jay, but he has really bad numbers in AAA. I just want to throw this out there. Questionable by Sportsnet to throw this in. Yeah, he's an innings eater, but I feel like everyone on this list is an innings eater. He has a 4.62 ERA in AAA there. And again, a depth guy for AAA, sure, throw nothing at him and get him to help us with our AAA depth. But other than that, I think we can brush over this guy and wrap up the video. The first one and Chase Anderson were kind of... Ben Lively and Chase Anderson were two that I actually really like. I think that could be realistic. The other ones there are a little bit disappointing if you're a Jays fan, and I almost wish we weren't... you wouldn't expect us to have this conversation at the start of the season a few months ago.
Yeah, I can't believe I'm saying this at this point of the season, but I can't wait till Hyun-Jin Ryu is ready to return to this team because the Jays need him badly, and it's bad that they're relying on a 37-year-old to come in and be a difference maker. Yeah, off Tommy John. So you don't even know what to expect out of him, but he is someone that has been somewhat steady over the course of his career, had an ERA title as well with the Dodgers. So the Jays need any sort of help that they can get, and hopefully they can start to turn things around here because these are games that you got to start to win. The schedule does start to ease up, believe it or not, after the Baltimore Orioles, the Texas Rangers, and the Miami Marlins, because you'll have the Oakland A's, the Detroit Tigers, the Chicago White Sox, just to name a few after that. So hopefully you have some scheduled wins in there as well, but you got to stay the course over these next 8 games that you have coming up. or else things could get really rocky, and we might be talking about them falling out of the race altogether.
Yeah, let's really hope we're not talking about selling at the deadline, like I know I've seen some people on Twitter discuss. But that'll wrap up the video. Let us know some potential trades you like these the most. A lot of these, are depth pieces. They're not super exciting, but there's a couple guys in there that I think could be very valuable to the Jays, like we mentioned. But that'll wrap up the video. Hopefully, the Jays get a win today because they really need to go like 4-4 over the next 8 games if you want to stay. That's kind of the goal, which is a pretty low goal. But that'll wrap up the video. Thank you guys for watching. Go Jays.